Welcome to Pivot2First. I'm Mike Seidle, and every day as CTO at Pivot CX, I get to work with some of the most brilliant people in the industry with one single goal, turning hiring into a competitive advantage. Today, I'm joined by Kyle Roed, Vice President of Global HR at CPM Companies, co-founder of Disrupt HR, and host of Rebel Human Resources podcast. I think, Kyle, you and I met about a year ago when you had me on your podcast. Welcome.
Thanks, Mike. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk to your listeners.
So tell us a little bit about your journey. I mean, you've done some really unique things, and how did you end up starting Disrupt HR?
Yeah, well, I appreciate the question. I think, it's the same question that so many HR professionals say, which is, I fell into human resources or HR found me. So I actually started my career in retail, as many of us did, working in, grocery stores, and kept that going after college, went to the University of Iowa and had an opportunity to work for one of the largest retailers in the world. And what I quickly found was that I just loved everything related to people practices. And, I say what I always say, it's kind of joking, is, you start in HR because you like people. And then after you've been in HR long enough, you realize maybe I don't like people as much as I thought I did. But all kidding aside, it's just for me, it's the people practices that are really exciting, and one of the biggest impacts that happens in the world of business, right? Like, what is business? What is an organization? It's the people that make it up, right? So to fast forward a little bit, a lot of my journey in HR has been around the realm of innovation. And what I have seen year over year after being in this field for almost 2 decades now is that it's just ripe for change. And that I mean, I'm sure we're going to talk about that a little bit here, but that is really kind of the driving force behind everything that I've done, both within my company and outside of my company in my personal pursuits. And so, Disrupt HR was founded by myself and two other local HR practitioners with the intent to disrupt the way that we think about human resources. And it's really an information interchange where we bring people together. It's quick, heavy hitting presentations. And the idea is that we are challenging the world of work and really challenging the way that HR thinks about the world of work. We can be so much more than admin or quote back office support, right? It's such an important component of the business and any organization, and so that's really kind of the driving force and what brought me here and prompted me to start a podcast, which has been super cool. And
Yeah.
yeah, Mike, I get to meet cool people like you.
So, one of the things, Disrupt HR, I think it's been a real force for good in the industry. As I look at in my journey in the HR tech space, especially, Disrupt HR has consistently been a source of people looking to innovate. It's not uncommon for me to run into somebody who's maybe a sales opportunity. And the reason they are is because they're finally looking at how do we change something, which kind of brings me to a question I have for you, because the way you describe your podcast, one of the first, I'm not sure where it is, but one of your intros to your podcast has this question and I love this one. Do you still manage people with processes from 40 years ago? A lot of our audience are CEOs, CFOs that are out there looking at, look, the one thing that's holding our business back is hiring. We've got this production facility. We're operating 2 shifts. We should be operating 3. I've got stores that we have the rights to operate our franchise business in. I can't open stores because I don't have enough people to staff them. Um, what is it? What is it that CEOs need to look at out there? What are the most common out of date practices that you're seeing out there in the wild?
Oh wow, that's a great question. The 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 origin of that question, are you still doing processes from 40 years ago? It's really what I would say, it's a cautionary tale of me trying to manage within that infrastructure. And I think I specifically asked that question to one of my C suite executives at one point. why are we operating like this is 40 years ago, right?
Yes.
And in that context, the example was an attendance policy that was like just was not working. And it was, I think, the sixth or seventh attendance policy that we tried to roll out, and it was, points based or some archaic, attendance system that just didn't work. And but I think to go back to your question on what are some of those out of date practices, I think the first thing that I would argue is the world is speeding up. And that means that the expectations of our employees, our applicants, our candidates, our hiring processes, like everything needs to get faster. And I don't think anybody's going to argue with that point. Case in point, and we talked about this on our podcast. Speed wins in recruiting,
Every time.
right?
Every time.
Absolutely. And so and I can't tell you how many times I go to market with a job that I think is just absolutely awesome. And it's like, well, this is going to be easy because this job is super cool. And like, if I were this candidate, in this realm, I would love this job. And then we get like four or five really great candidates, and we start the process, and then it just grinds to a halt because I have a hiring manager that wants to see, well, can we see two more? Or
Yep.
or it's like there's some really slow part of the process where it's like, well, we can't talk for another week. If you delay it more than a week or two, your competitors are going to hire that person. I mean, a lot of times it's not because of better, better job descriptions or better employer value propositions. Sometimes I will hire people and I will win the war just because I can hire you. Like I can call you tomorrow. I will have an interview the next day, and I can get you a job offer. I can get you starting in my door in like 5 days, right? And it's like, and then by the time inertia, somebody's already started and they're starting to get callbacks for the other people that they interviewed for, or well, too late. I already started a new job, and so
Kyle,
I
the
would,
thing,
I mean,
the thing,
that's a big piece.
oh yeah. So Kyle, one of the things that to me, at least with what we do, gets me so excited is when I get a new customer who makes a hire and then they call me 2 weeks later and go, you know what happened, Mike? I hired this person and then they started their job. 2 weeks later, they finally got a call from the recruiter from the other guy. I
Absolutely.
love watching people speed up because they don't think A, they don't think it's possible. And B, when they do speed up, it turns out all these great candidates, the people that they really want to hire, you can actually hire them.
Well, that's so true. And I think, in the hiring, we could fill an hour and a half and just talking about hiring practices. I think some of the other things are important as well, though.
Sure.
It's the approach, it's the approach of policies like that are unintentionally exclusionary. And
Hmm.
that's been a lot of my focus as well as we talk about things like building a culture. What does that mean, right? Like that I would argue is one of the most important things that a C-suite executive can do, build a culture. But the hard part is, okay, how, right? And so it's things like what are your communication structures, right?
Yeah.
Are you using the same style of communication that you've used, 40 years ago, toolbox talks and flyers in the break room? Like, does anybody actually read those flyers? Is anybody actually thumbing through your 50-page handbook to understand what your expectations are? And the answer is no, right? Like, people want it on demand. They want it on their cell phone. They want to be able to understand what you're saying. They want to have a social media presence. They want to be proud of where they work and be able to share that. Like, there's so many different things that if you can tap into it, it can really help. And then the other thing I would say is like, look at some of the challenges that we're facing, as a society and how those have trickled into the workplace lately. I mean, things like, social justice, sustainability, some of these topics that they're big, hairy, scary topics for
Oh
an
yeah.
employer to take on sometimes. But
Well, a year ago when you and I were talking, we were in the middle of the COVID thing, and everybody was just terrified, right?
what's that? What's COVID?
Well, yeah. And now here we are. It's like we're at the end of this thing, and we still have an awful lot of people that really are concerned about different parts of that, and there's still a lot of employers that don't address it. So
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. I mean, we could keep going. I think the answer there though is you have to be willing to change. and you have to be willing to listen and confront some things that maybe you didn't understand. A great example, this on the social justice side of things. You know, my organization's manufacturing organization,
Sure.
and a lot of technical talent, um, and in an industry that's not historically very diverse. I mean, we operate in the Midwest of the United States, and the argument has always been, well, we just hire the best talent. But what we had to do in my organization was question that. You know, the
Mhm.
question is not, um, is there talent? The question is, where are we looking for talent? Right? And it's the how am I eliminating a barrier for people to find me as an employer? And where are we actually casting our net? So are we actually trying to diversify our recruiting practices to diversify our hires? Right? It's asking that type of question as opposed to saying, well, there's just, this is just the way it is in this industry. It's questions like that that really will make a big impact if you're intentional and you question your preconceived notions.
I tell you, diversity is a really interesting topic, but and we could talk all day about it. But there's one really important nugget in there, and that's really if you're not seeing good diversity in your hiring, you probably aren't hiring the best people. You're
Right.
probably hiring all the people that kind of fit this cookie cutter image, and you're going to miss an awful lot of great talent.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you could Google it and find all the research, but you've got the halo effect. You've got some of this implicit bias. You've got the groupthink that happens when everybody thinks the same way and kind of just interacts the same way. And there's a lot. The truth is, there's a lot of comfort there. And I've certainly seen that in the organizations I've worked at where, you're just comfortable around people that are like you. That's the reality of the human experience. But if you allow that to happen at your organization, what will happen is the organizations that have more diversity, equity,
Right.
and inclusion, they're going to win. They're going to eat your lunch eventually. They're going to figure out something that your customer needs that you can't because they have diversity of thought. And they have also, what happens is you see these cultures intentionally build up inclusive structures to allow some of those great ideas to bubble up. So it's not just like, yes, it's the right thing to do. I think everybody would agree, we want to support people and help make this an inclusive society. It's also
Right.
really good for business.
Absolutely. Can't agree more. Since we're talking about what's good for business, so you're the CEO. What should you be asking your recruiting team? What should you be asking them about their process and their practices right now? What are those things that the CEO needs can ask quickly to go, hey, we're doing well or we're not doing well.
That's a great question. You know, I think those KPIs are really important. And KPIs in general are very important. But a couple of those key ones that I think about in the realm of human resources are sometimes hard to put your finger on. But there's a couple of really critical things I think that you need to be asking your HR team. Number one, what is the candidate experience? And that's a very open-ended question. So even if you just ask that question, you'll learn a lot
Ye-
when you understand. Either you get a blank stare and they look at you like, "What does that mean?" Or they tell you, "Well, it's okay. We have this, our applicant tracking system, requires this. It takes about 25 minutes to apply. Blah blah blah." And I've seen that. I kid you not. I used to have a system. It had all the bells and whistles. I won't name it, but it was one of the big ones. It was an applicant tracking system, and in order to get an offer letter generated, it had to flow through like 7 different layers of approval, and the recruiter literally had to like handhold it through the process and like
Mhm.
ping people that didn't like respond right away. So what that ended up doing is like from offer, like I want to offer a candidate a job to actually getting a candidate an offer letter. It was always like at least a week to a week and a half. It
And
was
this
just
was a
ridiculous.
week this was a week just spent waiting on somebody to log in and click an approve button.
That's exactly right, that's exactly right, and so we spent
Oh,
more time,
wow.
like, chasing down, like, "Hey, did so and so approve it? Did so and so approve it? Is
Yeah,
somebody
yeah.
gonna," and then inevitably, there'd be one person be like, "I didn't talk to this person, can I talk?" It's just like, ugh,
Back on
and
another week.
I mean, yeah, we ended up doing a Kaizen event, and we went in and we were like, "Okay, cut out like 75% of these approvers. If this person can't approve this, then why are they in the position they're in?" Right? They own the budget. Like, why does anybody else have to approve? And
Well, and there's
it's
also the
stuff like
part, if this person's too busy to look at it, maybe they shouldn't look at it.
right. Right. Like are they really gonna, is there going to be incremental value added by approval process? But that's one
So
question. Candidate
you brought up,
experience.
candidate experience. So you bring up one of my favorite cliches in the whole world of recruiting, which is, hey, CEO, you should actually go apply for a job at your own company and
Mm,
see what it's actually really
right.
like. Um, and a lot of CEOs never do that. And yeah, it takes 30 minutes. You'll learn more about your recruiting by doing that than you will by asking anybody on the team questions. You might
Well,
not like what you see, though.
if it takes you 30 minutes, it's too dang long. Should
Don't
take 5,
disagree.
right? Right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it really should.
I think some of the other, there are some other, quantitative measurements. It's things like time to fill,
Hmm.
which, that's pretty simple. Any applicant tracking system should have it, readily available. Um, Candidate quality or quality of hire, I think, is an important metric. And the way that I like to think about that is, okay, maybe we can fill positions, but can we keep them? Are we keeping the ones that we fill, right? So what does your new hire turnover rate look like? If something happens in that first 90 days, I consider that a selection error. Something
Hmm.
was missed throughout the recruiting process. You know, Now stuff happens, but
Sure.
within those first 90 days, there should have been something that you spotted. Maybe that person said, "Well, I like to show up, at least 75% of the time," and maybe that doesn't work, right? Well, the recruiter should have spotted that, and we should have called that out before they actually got fired for attendance, right? Or maybe somebody said, "Well, I can only work this hour to this hour," and then the first time they have overtime, they quit. It's stuff like that. Like so that I think is a really key metric. And then finally, I think there's some other metrics that you can look at that are just things like candidate flow. How many applicants are we actually funneling? Asking the question, how many candidates does it take to hire that one
Okay.
person?
Oh, wow.
What
So
does that
so
look
this
like?
is this is actually really timely. I just got done looking at the recruiting process at a company that has 4,000 open jobs. Okay. 4,000 open jobs. Guess how many applications they took in the last month?
Oh, how many applications?
Yes.
I don't know.
This is how many applies they got.
Yeah,
4,000. So they have
10,000.
4,000 open job, 4,000 applies.
Oh, really?
Yes. Now you're not going to hire everybody that applies,
No.
but if if the logic kind of follows, you should be able to make a dent in those 4,000 open requisitions if you have 4,000 applicants.
Right. Right.
A dent can be made there. Not You don't have 4,000 bad applicants there. There are
Right.
not 4,000 bad ones in there. Now maybe 70% of them are bad, but you still should be able to make a dent in that. It is amazing that to me that a lot of companies don't really metric their recruitment marketing and
Right.
look at how many applies did we get, how many of those turned into an interview, how many of them are just screened out for being totally not qualified versus those that are more of a decision. Because I think a lot of times what you see is a small amount are screened out as being just absolutely not hireable, and almost everybody else it's subjective.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point. And I think about, listen, CEOs, CMOs, CFOs, like we talk so much about sales and sales funnels and customer funnels and
Yes.
where is this coming from? Well, that's all recruiting is. It's a funnel. It's an experience. You're just trying to get somebody to make a purchase decision, i.e. work for you, right? And so the product that you're offering, it's just not a tangible product. It's the product is the company, right? So
Sure.
you use the term recruitment marketing, which I think should be used more. That's all it is. This is a marketing effort. And so, it's really it's the same KPIs. It's just, skewed a little bit for HR. And I've always said, there's two ways. There's really two ways to bring in people in an organization. You've got two ways to think about it. Number one is I'm going to go steal them from others, right? So I'm going to go acquire a customer from
Hmm.
another employer, right? That's pretty tough. And typically when you're going to do that, you're going to be paying more than what they're making, and obviously we've seen that. And I can't remember the exact statistics, but you can assume at least a 10% increase every time somebody jumps jobs. I mean, that's just kind of the
Sure.
market. So at least that's what I've seen. But then the other huge funnel of people that I think a lot of times people overlook, I call it's market development work. It's who are the people that I am not reaching right now with my recruitment marketing efforts. Like, who am I missing? Like, am I only targeting so and so on LinkedIn and I'm missing all these other people because they aren't on LinkedIn?
Hmm.
Are there other groups or demographics that I have not actively done outreach
Oh,
to? I mean, it's again, none of this is like, this isn't rocket science. Like, it might feel like it right now in this hiring environment. But the truth is, you're really just you're selling a product, which is you. So you got to find out what differentiates you from the market, and you got to figure out what is your value proposition to that future employee, and figure out the funnel. And then once you get there, I mean, if it takes 10,000 people to fill 4,000 jobs and you have 4,000 applicants, you will fail. Go figure out how much you have to spend to get 10,000 in the funnel.
no doubt. We see a lot of that out there where the budget's inadequate. But one of the things that we really, it just seems to be coming up more and more and more is speed of engagement. How long
Mhm.
does it take between when somebody applies and when they actually are having a real conversation with someone? And let's go back to your sales analogy. And this is where I think recruiting and sales diverge the most. In the sales world, I think almost everybody if I walked into a room with 1,000 sales leaders and asked the question, when should you call a lead? The answer is right now.
Right. Exactly.
Okay. When I ask a room full of 1,000 talent acquisition people, when's the right time to call a candidate? Some of them are going to say right now, but a lot of them are going to say, well, after we run it through the ATS and we've done a skills check and we reviewed their resume and the hiring manager's been through the stack of resumes and approved that I can reach out to that candidate.
Yep. Absolutely.
And that stuff's got to stop. It's just got to stop because it's blocking so many really transformations in different companies out there. So many times you see a recruiting process where the blocker is actually the company's own recruiters slowing down the time it takes to get to that
Right.
initial human to human contact. Nobody ever took a job without talking to the employer.
Right. It's so true. I've got a story there. So one of my previous employers, uh, high volume manufacturing. We're not talking like, not high wage manufacturing. Assembly line production work. Not the most glamorous work in the world. And I think at the time we had something like 90 open positions or something like that, in a facility of around 1,000 employees. So pretty, I was just feeling a little pressure to get some of these positions filled.
Sure,
and
sure.
and so, our approach was, well, okay, we need to do a hiring blitz. That's what we called it. And so, we said, okay, we are gonna take every single person with any HR aptitude, and we are gonna use up every single application that we have. We're gonna contact every single one today, right? And a couple hundred applications worth. It took some time, but a couple of those candidates that I called were really recent applicants. In like that day, like they came in that
Right, right.
day, and I called them.
So they
Like,
still remembered they applied, right?
yeah, yeah, exactly, right. That mattered. And so what was so funny is, I think almost every single one of them that had applied that day made some comment like, "Wow, that was fast." And it was like, and I'm like, "Yeah," and I wanted to say, "Well, this is always how fast it is here." But the truth is, it's because we were like panicking and we just needed to fill positions. But it was so that was so powerful for me to go through that experience, and kind of reflect on those candidates reactions, because what it told me is like, this is a competitive edge. If I can figure out how to do this on a regular basis, I am going to win the war for talent here, right? And turns out, we were able to, with that and a couple different approaches, we were able to fill those positions pretty quickly, just because we threw a lot of time and energy at it, and we responded really quickly. And it's funny because if you think about it from a candidate's experience, and I've had this conversation with recent hires with my current job, some of the feedback that you get by doing that is, I didn't really know anything about your company, and I wasn't really sure if I wanted to work there. I saw there was an open position, but the fact that you moved so quickly made me excited to work there, because that helped me understand, hey, things move quickly there. I can get something done. I can make an impact. Like, you actually capture a little bit of energy and excitement so that when they come into their first day in the workplace, they're excited to be there. Like, isn't that what we all want? So I think there's a lot of power in structuring your process and challenging your talent teams to structure that process to be quick, and not so quick that you lose your objectivity, but you need to be nimble, right? And you need to be able to make quick decisions. You still need to have structures in place to make good decisions on hiring. You can't just hire every applicant you get, um, unless you're absolutely desperate, which is kind of where some employers are probably at listening to this. But
Well, there's a really bad outcome to that.
mhm,
You have to have some level of selectivity in who you're
yeah,
hiring, or you're going to have problems, right?
yeah, absolutely. And that goes back to that quality of hire, right? So it's,
Yeah.
um,
So you
it's,
really
yeah.
you just can't cheat.
Right, right. You have to do it right. You have to invest time in it, and you can't. The other thing I would say, and this might frustrate some listeners who are on, they have smaller staffs, but if you think that your HR team can handle a heavy recruiting volume and be a successful HR professional in all the other aspects of HR, you're probably wrong. I think recruiting is a special skill. Not every HR person's a great recruiter. They're just not. Some
No.
HR people should be administrators and have the diligence to be wonderful structural administrators with things like payroll and compensation and compliance. And then you've got HR people who are your recruiters. And those, a lot of times, those are competing skill sets that you really need to take a hard look at. Your best recruiter might be your marketing professional, not the person processing your payroll. I mean, that you
You
need
know,
to
you
ask
know,
those
you're
questions.
it's no different in sales. If you go back to that, the person that's a very good sales rep might not be the right person to write quotes and proposals. They just might not have the mind for
What?
the detail.
Believe me. I mean, I used to have to write schedules for part-time employees and like manage the schedule and make sure we were like loaded up on schedule. Every single week when I had to write schedules, I wanted to jump out the window. I mean, I hated every minute of it. But if you put me in front of a candidate and you said, "Hey, you're interviewing people all day long," I'm like, "Yeah, bring it on!" Right? So, like, great example. Like, I'll call myself out there. Like, I'm not the quote guy. I'm not the. I'll stay in sales.
So the moral of the story is we want to talk to you if we want a job, but we don't want you managing the schedule.
No, please, no, no. I have
Yeah.
wonderful, wonderful helpers that shore up that opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, this brings me to kind of last thing, and this kind of brings together that whole HR, the whole thing you said about HR people not necessarily being the best for recruiting. This has come up 3 times in the last week for us, and I'm sure you run into this day to day in your journey. Um, I'm not allowed to talk to candidates unless they've completed our application. And by the way, that application has 42 questions on it. And if you don't fill it out, you don't get a chance at the job. Um, we see that a lot. We see a lot, especially where we have HR folks serving as recruiters and they've kind of put process above recruiting success, maybe. The application will have an overall maybe 5 or 6% completion rate, and you've kind of biased your whole selection process towards hiring people that are okay with filling in 42 question forms.
Oh god. Yeah, um You know what you will hire with that strategy? You will hire people who are so desperate that they'll fill out 42 questions on an application. I mean, okay, so, first of all, the very first decision point that I have when I chose my applicant tracking system was, do they have one-click apply? That's it,
Yeah.
right? Like, I just need all I need is a name and a resume. That's really all I need. All the
And
rest of
when
that
you're
stuff
saying one click apply, you're talking about like Indeed apply or and just apply on the job
I'm
board.
talking
No
like
friction.
yes, exactly, and that's the right term. It's that frictionless experience, right? And you think about it, like, okay, if I go into Amazon and I want to buy whatever, a sweater for my dog, I type in dog sweater, 16 dog sweaters come up. I force rank by which one's the best dog sweater that fits my price range. Buy, and then I don't even have to put in my credit card information because Jeff Bezos wants all my credit card details forever. So, but it's like it's so easy. It's like
Right.
stupid easy, right? That should be what an application is like for your organization. And you've got and everything I just described there is an aspect of that experience that you need to be thinking about. What's the rating of my organization? How do they do this? How do they do this without giving me all of their credit card details? Guess what? You can fill out an application after you put your resume into the applicant tracking system. That can be a part of your process, like after the first phone screen or second, on-site interview or whatever. Like, do you really need to know all the details of the last, like where they live and all that kind of stuff? No, all you need is a resume, period. And that can initiate the discussion.
And
Um,
honestly, just back to Amazon, what you're talking about there, one of the things that happens all the time with Amazon, people have questions about the product they're looking at. They want to get that answered before they're willing to put it in the cart.
right, right.
And jobs are no different. People have all kinds of questions about them before they're willing to invest any time at all in applying. Um, it's risky to them.
Yeah,
Just like buying a product is. I mean, it really is. So I think a lot of recruiters out there that or a lot of HR folks or whoever it is that's saying, "Hey, I'm not allowed to talk to a candidate until I have a job application," are really shooting themselves not in the foot. They're shooting themselves in the head because the best candidates are gonna have a question before they're gonna talk to you.
yeah. And I think that's a great call out. I think the other thing that I would say is, especially, since your audience is full of, executives and maybe not HR professionals, if you hear a comment like that, like, hey, we have to do this because of a law or because of compliance or blah, blah, blah. Listen, as an HR guy, you should challenge that, right? Like I don't necessarily like it when people challenge the whole compliance thing, but a lot of times we have these preconceived notions or it's been beaten to our head that an application is a best practice, right? We're going right back to what I talked about earlier, 40-year-old practices.
40-year old
Yeah,
practices all
I'm
the
not
way. Yeah.
aware of any law that requires an application, right? If anything, there have been laws that have come out lately, and we talk about something like ban the box, where it shows requiring an application up front can actually be a discriminatory act and cause an adverse impact to a select group of people. So, you know, like I don't know where that argument, comes from. You'll hear the same thing about family medical leave and illnesses and things like okay, these things are complicated. You need to make sure that you're following the law and that you're compliant. But if you think about the human experience and you just do the right thing in general, you're going to be compliant with the law, right? Now,
Hey,
there's an
hey,
asterisk there. Certain industries
Kyle,
are different, but
what if Amazon made you put your credit card in before you could browse products?
nope, not doing it. Right? Why would I
Well,
give you my information before I buy something, right?
what's the difference?
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great corollary. That's why I
So,
like you, Mike. Just cut right to the point. I used like 27 words, you used like 3. That was good.
so just kind of wrap things up, Kyle. I really enjoyed the conversation today. I think we covered a lot of really really interesting topics, and I think a lot of our audience will really be excited about hearing some of the things you had to share. And I think an awful lot of companies out there, they'll never want to admit it publicly, but I think a lot of them are really in that 40-year-old process bucket. They secretly are. I think sometimes when I look at my company and our own processes internally, we might be in the 40% or that 40-year-old bucket and need to get out of it. But I do have a couple little final questions for you.
Sure.
These are really, really easy. What book has really been transformational for you? Can be about business, can be about anything. But what book was really almost life changing, if not
Mm.
life changing?
Oh wow, that's a great question. So I've been reading a lot of books lately. I've kind of rediscovered the joy of reading. If I think about it in a professional context, I'm going to go back to one of the books that I read early in my career, and it's really been formative, and that was Good to Great. And
Mm-hmm.
but specifically the content talking about level 5 leadership. And that's been something I've carried with me throughout my entire career, is that kind of that aspiration of being that level 5 leader, which does challenge some of the conventional norms about what good leadership looks like. And yeah, so I think that's got to be the one that's been kind of that true north, ever since, really college.
Okay, so favorite movie.
Oh, favorite movie? That's tough. Well, I have 3 kids, 10 and under, so right now it's a lot of, like, Pixar and stuff, but I'm gonna
Sure.
go back, I'm gonna go way back, and I'm gonna say, ever since, I was a kid, Shawshank Redemption's probably my number 1. I could watch if that's on, I'll just stop and watch it every time, I don't care, yeah, great actors and great story of triumph.
Absolutely. And then finally, tell our audience just a little bit about your podcast and where to go if they want to subscribe.
Yeah, thanks for that. I appreciate it. So my podcast, it's a lot of the content we've talked about here. It's just everything innovation in the people space, and I get to talk to all sorts of awesome people who are really doing some world changing work in the HR space. And so, if there's a topic that might interest you, we've done about 100 episodes, so there's probably something that would interest you. You can go to www.rebelhumanresources.com. All the episodes are listed there. You can check them out. And then if you want to connect with me, I'm on LinkedIn. It's Kyle Roed, Roed, like Roed. There's a Chris Farley Black Sheep joke in there somewhere, but yeah, I'm in LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to connect with me. And I'm an HR guy, so I'm on LinkedIn like every 5 minutes. So if somebody's looking, wants to connect, I'd love to connect.
Well, Kyle, thanks so much for being with us. Really enjoyed the time with you today. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Mike. You too.